We know the Cameron Johnson breakout is here for the Phoenix Suns. What does it mean? We're not going to get carried away with the can they afford him and whatnot and all of that, but we have to start looking forward, both for this year's playoffs and down the line. We'll do that on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a contributor at Suns.com as well as Dime Magazine, and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons. Thank you guys all for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. A big shout out to everybody helping us grow the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe if you like what you're listening to. Of course, thank you to everybody listening on every podcast platform as well. We are free. We are everywhere. And the best way to keep us everywhere and free is to keep listening, keep following along with everything going on here on the show. You can follow us at Locked On PHX Suns on Twitter to keep up every day as well. We're going to get to Cameron Johnson, who scored a career-high 38 points on what we now know is an injured right quad. And his vanishing act was his last performance prior to was a game-winning buzzer-beater shot on Friday night. We all know how that all went, but I want to talk a little bit about what the whole breakout that we are seeing from him means for the Suns, both in their chances this season. Does he make them better? Are they better positioned to make a run because of him? What does he mean to this team? And then what really should we be on the lookout for this offseason when he becomes eligible for an extension? So we'll get to all of that. But I want to start with the Milwaukee Bucks game, which Cameron Johnson did not play in, but it's the conversation around that game, both from Monty Williams, I think first and foremost, but also just generally speaking, has largely centered on the free throws, which, do not get me wrong. Let's see here. 11 free throw attempts for the Suns, 29 for the Milwaukee Bucks. Totally understand. You're not going to hear me argue the numbers are the numbers, but I don't think that in this particular case tells the full story of what has gone on this season. Now, Monty likes to emphasize the fact that Giannis in 6 NBA Finals games last summer got to the free throw line 85 times. That was in Phoenix, in Milwaukee, no matter what, that happened. Again, can't argue with those numbers. What I can argue with, though, is if that is the reason that the Suns are losing these games. And I also feel like we have to remember that they have not always lost these games. That's where we got to start. So if you look back to February 10th, the last time these teams played, the first regular season bout between these two teams, the first NBA Finals rematch we saw this year, the Suns won. They blew out the Bucks on their home floor in Phoenix. I was at that game. It was a great one. It was exciting. The Suns had 29 free throw attempts in that game, which is the same amount that the Bucks just had on Sunday night. And Milwaukee only had 25. So the Suns actually out-attempted from the free throw line the Bucks in that game, and they won. In the NBA Finals last year, we look at game 1 of the NBA Finals. The Suns won that game by 13 points, 118 to 105. The Suns had 26 free throw attempts in that game, led by 10 for Devin Booker. The Milwaukee Bucks had 16, 12 of which came from Giannis Antetokounmpo. Game 2 of the NBA Finals, the Suns won by 10 points, 118 to 108. In that game, the Bucks had 23 free throw attempts, 18 of which came from Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Suns had 14. So a little bit more, but not a significant disparity, all things considered. Bridges had 8. Booker surprisingly had 0. That's the game, if you remember, where he had 7 made threes. You go to Milwaukee, where game 3 took place. Of course, the Bucks won that one by 20 points. Booker sits the whole fourth quarter. We're not going to rehash the finals. 16 free throw attempts for the Suns, 26 for the Bucks, which is the most significant disparity up to that point. Again, Giannis 17 of those 26. Game 4, the Bucks won by 6. We all remember. The Bucks had 29 free throw attempts in that game, not only from Giannis in that case. Middleton had 8, part of his 40-point night, and Jrue Holiday had 5. The Suns had 19 free throw attempts. So again, another game in which Milwaukee had a double-digit advantage. I won't go through game 6 and all the rest, but the point being, A, the team that wins tends to get to the free throw line more, especially with how these two teams play, especially with how they match up with one another. They both play versatile. They both play with size at each position. They play an ISO type of offense in large part. You know, at least the way that possessions end is often going to be one person shooting, driving, something like that. In the finals, it was a lot of ISO for Booker. So that's the case. And then the second point, B, is that the disparity is largely coming from Giannis. So we can quibble with Giannis getting calls, and I think if we all remember back to last year, that certainly was a complaint that Suns fans had. He puts the referees in an incredibly difficult spot because he is so much stronger than just about anybody else in the entire NBA. And he's so decisive and skilled and athletic that he moves in a way where it's kind of like when you walk into a room with your head high and you're wearing a suit and you talk in a booming voice, people are going to think you know what you're doing and where you're supposed to be. If you walk in and you're coy and meek and shy, and you're dressed like a schlub, then people are going to think you're in the wrong place. The same goes for basketball in terms of getting foul calls. Giannis moves in a way where he gets the benefit of that doubt. So I think that's a conversation to be had. What is not necessarily a conversation to be had is that the free throw discrepancy has always been out of whack in favor of the Bucks. I don't think anybody heard Monty or anybody on the Suns complaining about the free throw disparity when the Suns won games 1 and 2. Game 2, Milwaukee had more free throw attempts in last year's finals, but the Suns won by double digits. I don't think that was a topic of conversation at that time. And if it was, it rightly centered on Giannis. So it's not the whole story. And I don't think it's really the reason the Suns are losing these games. Giannis getting to the free throw line is a significant part of how he's going to play basketball. That's not unique to when these two teams happen to match up with each other. That's always what. So that's heading into Sunday's game. I don't feel like it's always going to tell you who's going to win. And I don't feel like it is. I think that the Suns side has maybe blown it out of proportion a little bit. On Sunday, though, what I think is getting lost is that the Bucks free throw situation wasn't driven by Giannis in this case. And so maybe you look at that and you say, okay, that makes me more mad because it's out of the ordinary and it's guys getting to the free throw line who don't always do that. I think that's fair. I think if you're going to get mad, getting mad about Sunday's game does make sense to me, even if it actually doesn't fit into the pattern that most of these games have. Giannis only got to the line 6 times in the game on Sunday out of 29 total for the Bucks. Now, for the sake of comparison, Jrue Holiday this season getting to the line 2.7 times. He's never had a season in his career where he got to the line more than 4 times per game. On Sunday, 6. Chris Middleton, I'm not going to cry wolf too much about. He can do that. He's a mismatch for most NBA teams. But nevertheless, 29 for the Suns, 29 for the Bucks, 11 for the Suns, and that brings us to the final point. Even if you're going to be upset about what happened on Sunday because you feel like Holiday got calls that he shouldn't have, Middleton got calls that he shouldn't have, whatever the case may be. Maybe you think it fits into this wide conspiracy against the Suns and the refs are only ever going to call fouls in favor of Milwaukee and it's just a curse. I don't agree with you, as I've said, but the fact remains a lot of this is brought about by the Suns on themselves. You heard me raise my eyebrows when you saw me, if you're on YouTube, that Devin Booker got to the line 10 times in game 1 of the NBA Finals, game 2 of the NBA Finals, whichever home game it was. That's uncharacteristic. The Suns don't do that. They don't get to the free throw line. So to me, it's more indicative of these players on Milwaukee being a matchup problem more than any other aspect of anything you can look at. Those guys get to the line. It's part of what they do. They are great at it. They have a history and a reputation from the officials of doing that as part of how they're going to play basketball. The Suns do not. They do not attack the basket, so they don't get to the line. That is how it happens. That's the bottom line with this matchup. It's going to have to be something the Suns overcome if they're going to beat the Bucks, and I don't think that it was anything unfair or biased in this case. The Suns lost a game that they were very, very close to winning, and I don't think fouls were the reason why. That'll close us out for that conversation about the Bucks. Hopefully we're talking about them. Well, maybe some of you would disagree. Hopefully we're in a situation where, as Suns fans and followers, we can be talking about a potential matchup with the Bucks, because that would mean the finals are on our horizon again. But that was the last matchup between those two teams, so I just had to get that 2 cents in. We'll get to Cam Johnson, guys. First, though, today's show brought to you by BetOnline. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is plunging into its postseason, both on the college side, which is right around the corner, and the pro side in the not-too-distant future. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach might land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for those sports scores, odds, and lines, but also podcasts and news. That's right. BetOnline is getting in on the content game as well. And it's not just basketball either. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, the UFC, and even your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the latest trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Cameron Johnson, since the All-Star break, which of course also coincides with Chris Paul's absence, 23.4 points, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds per game, 22% usage rate, and an absurd 85% true shooting percentage, which, needless to say, would be an all-time record if it were to be sustained for any length of time. But of course, it's just been 5 games. Regardless, the value that this man has had to this team is obvious. 60% shooting from the field, almost 60% from 3. He's getting to the line. He has 24 free throw attempts in 5 games, which is almost 5 per game. No matter which way you slice it, he has taken a massive step forward, and I think the calculus has changed about what we can expect out of him, and I think potentially what the Suns' bottom line can be this year. I think this type of stretch from him is significant enough to merit that type of reevaluation. So here's where I stand, just to put into perspective how special his season has been, because I always, almost comically at this point, have gone back to 538, which does these contract projections. Basically, what is the value of a player, anybody in the NBA, going to be 5 years, over the next 5 years? And it charts it. If they're young, then it's going to be, it's going to have a slant upward, a slope upward. If it's somebody who's on the tail end, it'll be downward. And if it's, the middle, maybe it's flat. Obviously, Cam Johnson, being a little bit older than Devin Booker, notoriously, is in an interesting spot as far as age goes, but without any of that taken into consideration, it was laughable what 538 put out there heading into the season. That I think his #1 comp was James Jones, actually, which is sort of funny in its own way. And then Darrell Wright, if you remember him, was the other sort of recognizable name on that list. He was the Warriors shooter, kind of stretch 4, stretch 3 type of guy when Steph and Monte Ellis were cutting it up at the beginning of Steph's career. Not players that you associate with the level that we've now seen Cam Johnson rise to, but that's where he was to start this year. This season, that was where the numbers projected him to be. Now, my favorite, my go-to all-in-one stat is not box plus minus or real plus minus at ESPN, but if you read and listen to the experts on the field, they now say dunksandthrees.com, which is their stat is called estimated plus minus, is the gold standard. It's the best one. We'll just stick with it. I don't necessarily know what's the best and what's not. I don't know how most of these are calculated. I can read it and I can pretend to understand. But this one, effective plus minus, tells us that Cam Johnson has been a +1 or better in both offense and defense this year. So don't get it twisted that it is just offense from this guy. The defense has been there as well. And what this statistic tells us is that they've been basically equivalent. A little better on offense, but great, fantastic on defense as well. That all adds up to a +2.2 effective plus minus. Again, 0 being neutral for those who are unfamiliar with how those normally work. 0 is neutral. Anything above that, you're a positive addition to your team. Anything below that, you are a negative. So being in the positive in and of itself is an accomplishment, but Cam at +2.2, here is a list of the players that he has a better effective plus minus than, estimated plus minus than. Jaylen Brown, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, all-star starter Andrew Wiggins. I could go on. Nikola Vucevic, Jalen Brunson, CJ McCollum, Jay Crowder, which is relevant to what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of the show. So it's very clear that Johnson has taken a leap on both ends, that he is among the more valuable players on the Suns, and it starts to beg the question of what do you do with him? It is a luxury. It is a rich man's problem to have a great player, somebody blossoming who is so ingrained with what you want to do as a team, be able to be on your bench and be somebody that you sort of have to figure out a role for. But that doesn't mean that it is any easier to do that. Not something that I envy Monty Williams for having to figure out over the next month, basically. It's not a lot of time. While Paul is out, I think it's pretty obvious that there are going to be a ton of minutes for Cam Johnson. I think you could see the Suns. They haven't really gone to the point book stuff since Payne has been back, but I guess it was, well, no, we don't know because we haven't seen that rotation. That's why my brain is remembering it that way. So I would think we would see some more of the Booker, Bridges, Johnson, Crowder, Ayton lineups once Booker returns from the health and safety protocol, even with Payne healthy. And those are moments where Johnson can really be a like genuine offensive cog. But I think when you get to what is the Suns' best lineup in the playoffs, like we need to win a game. We're down 3 heading into the final 3 minutes of a game or something like that. I think that's where it starts to be a question. And we've been talking about, will Cameron Johnson usurp Jay Crowder in the rotation for honestly a very long time at this point. But what I don't think we anticipated is, I don't think I'm ready to necessarily say this outright, but I think that there are games where Johnson is going to be more important to winning than maybe Mikal Bridges will be. Certainly more than Jay Crowder will be. And again, this is all going to be matchup dependent because you are in a situation where you have Jay Crowder out there who, if you're playing Anthony Davis, if you're playing Giannis, if you're playing Luka even, you might want to have Jay Crowder out there. He's big, he's strong, he's a great defender. So that's a matchup where you need that. If you're guarding, John Morant, you probably want to have Mikal Bridges out there. Like there are obviously moments and mixing and matching is going to be a part of this. But I also think we know offense is probably what doomed the Suns. It was stopping Giannis in isolation and not fouling him, and it was scoring in crunch time, aside from Devin Booker, when things were bogged down. And so if Johnson can continue to do that, attacking closeouts, initiating offense, cutting, running in transition, all the things that he has come to do, running pick and roll even, he could be a major ingredient for the Suns down the line. And we could very, very easily start to see him steal some minutes from Jay Crowder, steal some closes of games from Jay Crowder. So that's sort of an overview of how good he's been and what it could mean for this team. We're obviously going to continue to check in on that, so I don't want to get too imaginary with the role in the rotation side of things. But it also begs the question of what happens when it comes to his contract extension possibilities and keeping this team together, keeping this core together. So just because he is playing so well right now, and we're getting this glimpse of what it would look like post Chris Paul and all that stuff, I think it's a fascinating time to dive into that. So we'll do that in just 1 second. First, though, guys, one quick break. Cameron Johnson is maybe the best spot-up shooter in the NBA right now. I will admit, I think I would have given that crown to Joe Harris prior to this season. He has been hurt. Of course, that title belt would have been held by Klay Thompson for many years. He has also been hurt. So the competition is a little bit depleted right now, but nevertheless, Johnson has a claim to that at 45% from three this season. He has the quickest release that I've ever seen in person. I understand you might like Steph or Klay in that, but he can get the shot off. He's 6'8". He can get it over everybody. Like, that is a bona fide, massively important skill in the NBA. And the fact that, as I just went through, he is impacting the game on the defensive end of the floor. He is increasingly getting opportunities to play make, to run pick and roll, to get sets called for him as a shooter, attacking in transition, attacking the basket more, getting to the free throw line, all the stuff I just outlined. You are looking at a player who is pretty incredibly valuable. I also want to throw out there that from a Suns perspective alone, well, actually, let's wait on that. I want to just look big picture macro for right now, because that really will determine the value on the market, so to speak. Even though he won't obviously hit free agency, he wouldn't be eligible to do that right now. He is merely going to be finishing his third season, which means he's extension eligible, just like Bridges, Shamet, and Ayton were this past year. So he won't be a free agent, but he could sign a new contract. And so that type of thought process, the skills that he's added, the value that his game has in the modern NBA, all that stuff is going to inform what he could earn. We'll get to the Suns part of that in a second, but it's not crazy. It really isn't. Like, I feel like I'm about to get into some numbers that might sound bananas, but just bear with me here. Duncan Robinson, who I talked about last year, signed, and you can quibble with if it was merited or not, or any of that, but 5 years, $90 million, straight up 18 average annual value. 5 years, $90 million. He also, importantly within that, was an older player coming into that contract, because he, like Cam, was a long-term college guy. So he's already, in his prime, Robinson. Joe Harris, another player that I mentioned, very similar skill set. I'm probably the single most similar player to Cam Johnson of anybody in the NBA. I think as of right now, I think Johnson, we might see him continue to expand that game. But pound for pound right now, Joe Harris, probably the most similar guy. 4 years, $75 million the prior summer. That is an annual average value of basically 18.8 million. So 18 to 19 is that market. What I'm pointing out by highlighting those two in particular, we can get into Davis Bertans, who got overpaid, and I don't think that's not a similar type of guy to Cam, all things considered. The point is, Mikal Bridges makes $18 million a year on his contract 4 years, $72 million. 18 on the money, exactly. So if you're connecting the dots like I am, you're getting to a situation where Cam Johnson is in line to make at least as almost as a baseline what Mikal Bridges makes, because that is the difference between a good shooter and a great shooter. Is a good shooter, which is I think what Bridges was valued at, although I think his contract was significantly undervalued, under par, in my opinion. Hold on, I am saying the wrong thing for Bridges' contract. Let me get the right numbers here. 4 years, $90 million was Mikal Bridges' contract, which was 22. So my point was he will make at least 18. He could make up to what Mikal Bridges is making. I typed the wrong number in on my notes, so let you behind the scenes, guys. But the point remains, that ballpark is in play for Cam Johnson if you follow those dots. Duncan Robinson, Joe Harris are making 18 or 19. That was the market the past 2 summers. Cam Johnson can make a claim, hey, I've been an even better overall player than them. I'm better defensively than them. I've won more than they did when they were around. And I am an incredible culture guy and all that other stuff that you might want to put in there if you're Cam Johnson's agent. So, and my teammate just signed a 4-year, $90 million contract. So that's the market on this team for a great wing. Pay me that. And I don't think it would be crazy to see. Now, I can't project what any of that means necessarily when it comes to keeping the core together or any of that stuff, mostly because there are so many permutations of this stuff, right? You could offload Dario Saric. You could offload Jay Crowder's salary. You could offload Cameron Payne for all I know, with maybe the Aaron Holiday becoming the substitute, the backup point guard there. You could look at a situation where Landry Shamet is part of it. Like, I don't feel like it's just black and white. Well, can you add Cam Johnson to this with DeAndre Ayton on a max? Like, I don't know. I don't know. But let's see here. If you go to DeAndre Ayton and you give him the 25% max, which is 5 years, $173 million starting next offseason, and you extend Cameron Johnson at, let's say, his salary locked into place right now for the 2022-2023 season is $5.9 million. The following season is when he would become a free agent. So let's just say it's 4 years starting at $20 million. Let's say it's 21 the next year, 22 the year after that, and then 23 the year after that. I know that's not always how. That would be 4 years, $86 million. Complete that signing. I'm on Cleaning the Glass looking this up. You have negative $41 million in cap space, and you have, let's see, Crowder and Saric would be off the books at that point. Torrey Craig would be off the books at that point. JaVale McGee will be long gone unless the Suns give him a long-term contract. Landry Shamet, for some reason, is not signed. So his deal is about $12 million. You're still looking at about $22 million in luxury tax space, even with a contract for Cam Johnson starting at $20 million annually. Now, with that said, you have 7 players, including Shamet, under contract. So you're pushing it, but that's with Ayton on a $32.2 million starting salary and Cam on a $20 million starting salary. So my point is, those are very rough numbers, but the Suns can afford to keep this guy, despite everything I'm saying about his explosion, despite everything I'm saying about how valuable he is and how he might be closing games over Jay Crowder, and he might be on some nights more valuable to this team than Mikal Bridges, and maybe his ceiling is higher than Bridges' long term. I don't know. I'm not willing to say that that's impossible. With all of that said, the panic over can they keep Cam Johnson, I think, is overblown. Unless somebody just gets really aggressive, which would have to happen in restricted free agency. The Suns will have this exclusive negotiating opportunity coming up this summer, and I think they would take advantage of it. They did so with Bridges. They did so with Shamet. We know they talked with Ayton. They at least had an offer out there for him. So don't worry, I guess. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy this breakout. I mean, this is a guy we had no expectations for. He was a question mark coming out of the draft, and he has blown all of that out of the water. Just revel in it. Have fun. Watch this guy grow. I'm having a blast doing it. I could not be happening for a better dude. And it's one of the most exciting things in sports, getting to see somebody level up in this way. So don't worry. The contract stuff can be sorted out. If this ownership group and front office wants this team to stay together, it's more than reasonable for that to happen. And you maybe could even still stay out of the luxury tax. So don't worry about that yet. That is many years in the future. Buckle up, see what Cam Johnson can do to add to the title odds, and enjoy it. I'll be back tomorrow, guys, recapping the Orlando Magic game. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on everything you might have missed around the association on Monday night.